My whole life was built on a big lie, but one locked box in my grandmother's attic exposed a truth I was never meant to see. It was a rainy afternoon. I was up in my grandmother's attic sorting through boxes of dusty photo albums and clothes no one had worn in decades. She had just passed away, and I was left to handle everything alone. That's when I saw it, an old wooden box, hidden behind a stack of brittle books. It was heavier than it looked, with rusted hinges and a lock that hadn't been opened in years, and when I shook it, I heard something shift inside. At first, I thought it was nothing, just an old keepsake, but something about it felt different. Then, I found a note, tucked between my grandmother's cookbooks, folded neatly with her handwriting. It said, "Some truths are too heavy, but you deserve to know them. Open the box." My heart nearly stopped. Why would she leave me a message like that? What could possibly be inside that was too heavy to carry, but important enough that I needed to know? From that moment on, I couldn't stop thinking about it. At work, I was distracted. My boss snapped at me for missing deadlines. At night, I couldn't sleep. I kept dreaming about that box, about what it might contain. And then, my uncle saw it. The moment his eyes landed on the box, he froze. "Where did you find that?" he asked, his voice sharp, almost panicked. I told him it was just in the attic, and he laughed it off. "Throw it away," he said. "It's nothing but junk." But the way he looked at it, the fear in his eyes, I knew it wasn't junk. And I knew he was hiding something. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat down with a hairpin and carefully picked at the lock. My hands shook as I heard the click. The box creaked open. Inside were dozens of letters and photographs, all addressed to me. But the handwriting, it was my handwriting. And the dates? 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I stared at the first letter in disbelief. It was written like it came straight from my own thoughts, things no one else could have known about me. But I didn't write it, I whispered to myself. How is this possible? And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a box. This was a secret that was about to tear my entire life apart. The moment I read the first letter, my world started to crumble. The handwriting was mine, the thoughts were mine. The secrets written on those pages, they were things I had never told anyone. I couldn't understand it. How could these letters exist when I had no memory of ever writing them? Each envelope was dated, neatly stacked. One from 10 years ago, another from 12, and every single one written to me. At first, I thought maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe this was some sick joke. But the more I read, the more unsettled I became. One letter described the way I used to cry myself to sleep in high school, afraid I'd never fit in. Another talked about the fight I had with my mom in college, word for word, something I never told a soul about. And then there was the name, Daniel. Page after page, this mysterious Daniel appeared. Someone who seemed to know me better than anyone else. Someone who wasn't supposed to exist in my life. But when I looked at the photographs tucked between the letters, my blood ran cold. There he was, Daniel, standing in the background at my old school, sitting a few tables away at a cafe I used to study in, even outside the building where I worked just last month. It felt like he had been following me for years. I shoved the letters back into the box and slammed it shut, my heart racing. The next day, I went to Sarah. She was the only person I trusted. But when I showed her the letters, she just shook her head. "Emma, this isn't healthy. You're grieving. You're exhausted. Maybe you're just imagining things." Imagining things? How could I imagine photographs? How could I imagine letters written in my own handwriting? The doubt in her eyes stung. Instead of helping, she was pulling away. And for the first time in years, I felt completely alone. At work, I was slipping. I couldn't concentrate. My boss pulled me aside, warning me that if I didn't get it together, I'd be out of a job. But how could I focus when I felt like I was living in someone else's story? That night, I spread the letters across my floor, desperate for answers. And that's when I noticed something I hadn't before, a pattern. Each letter wasn't random. They were leading me somewhere. And the trail of words all pointed back to Daniel. But here's where it got worse. In the very last envelope was a photograph I'd never seen, a recent one, Daniel. Not 10 years ago, not 5 years ago, but last week. He was standing across the street from my office, looking directly into the camera, as if he knew the picture would end up in my hand. My stomach dropped. Who was this man? And why did he seem so tied to my life? I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to find him. I had to know the truth. The next morning, I tracked down his address from the back of one of the photographs. My hands shook as I knocked on his apartment door. No answer. But when I pushed the door open just slightly, my heart stopped. The apartment was empty, completely cleared out, except for one thing, a single leather-bound journal, sitting right in the middle of the floor, with my name written across the front. I picked it up, my breath shallow, and when I opened the first page, I felt my entire body go cold. It said, "If you are reading this, Emma, then you're ready to see the truth your family tried to hide." I thought opening the box was the scariest thing I'd ever do. But in that moment, holding Daniel's journal in my hands, I realized I was only at the beginning of a much darker truth. Everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. I sat on the floor of Daniel's empty apartment, clutching that journal like it was the only thing keeping me alive. The pages smelled like dust and ink, like they had been waiting for me. And with every word I read, the ground beneath me began to crack. The journal wasn't random. It was about me, my childhood, my family, things no stranger should have known. It spoke about how my grandmother had spent her entire life protecting me, how she'd hidden things because she believed some truths were too heavy for me to carry. But there was one line that made my hands tremble as I read it out loud. Emma, the mother you think you know is not the full truth. The story you were told was carefully crafted to protect you, but protection always comes at a cost. I froze. The mother I think I know? I'd grown up believing my parents' story was simple. My dad left when I was young, and my mom raised me the best she could. But the way Daniel's journal described it, there was more, much more, and it all tied back to my uncle. For years, my uncle had been whispering his version of events, that my dad was a coward, that my mom was too fragile to tell me everything. And I had believed him. But now reading these pages, I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been manipulating me all along. My chest tightened. I didn't know what to believe anymore. The next day I told Sarah about the journal. She shook her head. Emma, please, you're going too far with this. You're letting some box control your life. But the way she avoided my eyes, the way she pulled her hand back when I tried to grab hers, it felt like she knew something. For the first time in our friendship, I didn't feel like she was on my side, and that hurt more than I could admit. Still, I kept reading. The journal painted Daniel as someone who had been in the background of my life all along, not as a stranger, but as a protector. Someone my grandmother had asked to watch over me. And according to the final entry, Daniel had proof that my uncle had been scheming for years, proof that he had tried to manipulate not only me, but my grandmother's estate. The words made me sick. My own family betraying me behind my back. But nothing compared to what happened next. I finally found him, Daniel. He was sitting alone in a quiet coffee shop, staring out the window like he'd been waiting for me. When our eyes met, my stomach turned. He didn't look dangerous. He didn't look like a stalker. He looked tired, like a man who had been carrying a burden for far too long. I sat down across from him, gripping the journal. Why do you know so much about me? Who are you, really? His voice was calm, steady. Emma, I was never meant to be part of your life. I was asked to protect you, to make sure you never uncovered what your uncle was doing. But now you've opened the box, and you can't unsee the truth anymore. I shook my head. This doesn't make sense. Why would my grandmother involve you? Why not tell me herself? Daniel leaned forward. Because she knew the truth would break you, and because she knew your uncle would stop at nothing to keep his secret. My chest tightened. What secret? He looked me dead in the eyes. That your entire childhood, the story you were told about your family, was carefully rewritten. Your uncle changed everything. My hands shook under the table. I didn't want to believe him, but deep down, I knew this wasn't just some random lie. Daniel's eyes softened. You have a choice, Emma. Leave it or open the final compartment in the box. But know this, once you open it, there's no going back. What you find inside will change your life forever. That night, I sat in my room staring at the box. For hours, I held the tiny key in my hands, and with one deep breath, I slid it into the lock of the hidden compartment. As it clicked open, I whispered to myself, I have to know, no matter what it costs. And the moment I lifted the lid, everything around me shattered. What I saw inside that final compartment shattered not just my family, but the life I thought I had built. The box creaked open slowly. Inside were documents, old letters, contracts, and photographs I had never seen before. But the moment I started reading them, my chest tightened. Because these weren't just papers, they were proof. Proof that my uncle had been lying for years. Proof that he had manipulated my grandmother, forged documents, and tried to cut me out of everything she wanted me to have. There were letters where he twisted the story of my dad leaving, making it seem like he abandoned me, when in reality my uncle had pushed him away. There were receipts, old bank statements, and notes. These were proof that my father had quietly been supporting and taking care of me, paying for my school expenses, medical bills, and even gifts, through my grandmother, even though I was made to believe he had abandoned me. The documents were about my father's love and responsibility. My dad was forced out of my life, but he loved me from afar and did all he could to be a part of my life. My uncle twisted the truth all these years to make my father look unreliable and irresponsible. My father was always present in my life, just hidden. I was lied to for years, taking away my chance to truly know him before he died a few years ago. I was so hurt and annoyed with myself for believing such lies about my dad. In the box also was a will that my uncle had tried to rewrite in his favor. And tucked at the very bottom was a letter from my grandmother herself. Her handwriting was shaky, but her words were clear. Emma, if you are reading this, then the lies have already started to unravel. I kept these secrets to protect you, but the truth has a way of finding its way home. Be strong. Do not let your uncle's deceit define your future. My hands trembled as I held the letter. I felt like the ground beneath me had given way. The people I had trusted the most had betrayed me, and when I turned to Sarah for comfort, that betrayal only deepened. Because instead of being shocked, instead of being angry on my behalf, she looked away. And in that silence, I knew. She had known something all along. Sarah, my voice broke. You knew, didn't you? She didn't answer. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, I didn't know how to tell you. I thought maybe your uncle was right. Maybe you weren't ready. Her words cut me deeper than any document ever could. The one person I had leaned on, the one person I thought I could always trust, had been keeping secrets from me too. I stormed out, clutching the box against my chest. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. The next day, I confronted my uncle. I laid the documents on the table, my voice trembling with anger. I know what you did. I know the truth now. For a moment, his face went pale, but then he laughed. That box was supposed to stay shut, he said coldly. You think a few old papers are going to change anything? You don't know what you've started. My blood boiled. I wanted to scream. I wanted to expose him right then and there. But before I could say another word, Daniel appeared in the doorway, holding a folder. Actually, he said firmly, I think she has everything she needs. Inside Daniel's folder was even more evidence. Emails, contracts, photos, everything to prove my uncle had been scheming behind my back for years. For the first time, I saw fear in my uncle's eyes. But just as I thought I had won, something went terribly wrong. Because as I gathered the papers, one envelope slipped from my hands. It scattered across the floor. pages flying everywhere. And when I scrambled to collect them, I realized one letter was missing. The most important one. A letter my grandmother had written, the one that tied everything together. It was gone. My heart sank, because I knew if that letter fell into the wrong hands, it wouldn't just ruin my uncle, it could ruin me too. And in that moment, I realized my fight for the truth was far from over. I thought I was finally free, but losing that last letter changed everything. For days I searched everywhere. I tore through the house, I retraced every step, but it was gone. And the terrifying thought kept running through my mind. If someone else had that letter, they held the power to twist the truth all over again. Then it happened. My uncle called a family meeting. When I walked into the room, I knew immediately. He had it, the missing letter, clutched in his hand, ready to spin the story his way. "Emma's confused," he said with a smirk. "She's been digging where she shouldn't. She's reading things out of context. My mother never wanted her to find that box." I felt my chest tighten. For a moment, I thought I was about to lose everything. But then, I remembered something. The last thing Daniel had said to me before disappearing. "Emma, the truth is heavy. But it only has power if you choose to carry it. Don't let fear silence you." Those words echoed in my mind. So instead of arguing, I pulled out my grandmother's other letters, her words, her handwriting, every piece of truth she left behind for me. I took a deep breath and slowly began to read them out loud, one by one. "Emma, if you're holding this, it means the truth could no longer stay buried. For years they told you your father was reckless, careless, that he abandoned you, but that was never true. Your father gave up everything, his own reputation, his own comfort, so that you could have a chance at a better life. The shame you carried, it was never his, it was never yours, it was theirs." Tears blurred the ink on the page, but I kept reading. The people who twisted the story did it to protect themselves. Your father was not a failure, Emma. He was a man who loved you more than life itself. Never forget that. With every word I felt stronger, and the room grew quieter, because no one could deny this was her voice, not my uncle's, not anyone else's. And as I read them out loud, it finally hit me. The words on the other letters written in my handwriting weren't my words. They were hers, my grandmother's. She had written them in my own handwriting on purpose, so I couldn't ignore them, so I'd feel every word like it was my own voice, speaking straight to my soul. With every sentence I realized she wasn't just telling me the truth, she was making sure I carried it. And in the silence of the room, I finally understood. All those years I believed I'd been abandoned. All those nights I cried myself to sleep thinking I wasn't enough, that I didn't have a father's love. It was all built on lies. My grandmother knew the truth, and she chose to leave it behind in the only way I'd believe it, in my own handwriting, so I couldn't run away from it. Her love, her sacrifice, and my father's too. And in that moment, I realized the box wasn't just locked with a key. It was locked with my freedom. And by opening it, I had finally unlocked myself. Finally. I looked my uncle in the eyes and said, "You've controlled this story long enough. Not anymore. The truth belongs to me now." For the first time, he had no words. He left that room in silence, his lies unraveling behind him. And in the days that followed, I didn't just rebuild my family's story, I rebuilt myself. Sarah came back to me, tears in her eyes, begging for forgiveness. And even though it hurt, I realized something. Holding onto anger would only chain me to the past. So I forgave her. Not for her, but for me. And the box, I locked it back. Not to hide it, not to bury the truth, but to remind myself that I am stronger than the secrets that once held me captive. Moral of the story, don't let the lies of others blind you from the truth. Sometimes the people we judge the harshest are the ones who've been loving us the most. Don't wait until it's too late to uncover the truth about someone you love, because once they're gone, all you're left with are the what-ifs. Search for the truth yourself. You may discover love where you least expected it. Every family hides secrets, but it's the truth that brings healing. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.